Welcome to The Beginning, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories behind the legendary anglers, the battles they fought, and the moments that define their journey. Our guest today is Drew Gill, a rising star in Major League Fishing, who took the Bass Pro Tour by storm. From Mount Carmel, Illinois, Drew earned Rookie of the Year in 2024 with a breakout win on the Chowan River, and followed it up with a Stage 3 victory at Lake Murray in 2025. Focused, fearless, and already chasing Angler of the Year, he's proving himself against the sport's best while building a legacy of his own. Today's podcast is hosted by Jordan Werner. Learn more about Jordan by visiting younghammer.com or find him on social media by searching for @JordanWernerFishing. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's get started.
All right, so we'll start off at stage 1 at Lake Conroe. So I've fished Conroe before, and it's a tough fishery. I went in the late summer, so it was probably at its worst when I went. But so, what do you think? How do you think you did at Lake Conroe?
Man, if we're going to do this step by step, if I was to give myself a grade, Conroe, I felt like that one was an A. I went out, executed a game plan, really didn't have much going for the no-scope periods going into the tournament. I had one area that I knew was going to end up playing pretty heavily, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to go about catching them in there. And it was one of those things, the weights were so high when we had scope that I didn't really have to tap into that much until the later parts of the tournament when it really started mattering to catch them without scope. So that one, went out with a good game plan, knew that 2.5 hours was going to matter more than anything else, and absolutely mowed them down when I had scope. Got out there, fished for those suspended fish around the timber, and caught them as fast as I possibly could for 2.5 hours. And then we just kind of settle into the rest of the day and kind of pick apart here and there. And, I spent the earlier parts of the tournament trying to find a second area apart from that Caney Creek mega conglomeration of boats that might have a big population. Just never did. Caught one here, one there, but never found a enormous, dense population outside of that main area. So it was one of those things. I went in with a good approach. Being the first event under the new format, I wasn't sure how it was going to play out, but I went in with a good approach. Focused on maximizing that scope period because it was a winter tournament. That's just the time of year where you got to lock in on that 2.5 hours. And then, try to figure out my bank deal as the tournament went on. And it was one of those things I'd give myself a good grade on that one. Conroe went well. One fun thing from that one was I caught the biggest bass I've ever weighed in a tournament. I caught an 8.2 the last day of that event, the championship round. And so, I got to leave that one with a pretty good check. Made a top 10. Started the season off on the right foot. So Conroe was a nice, solid start to the season for me.
Yeah, it was awesome watching everybody smash on them. Conroe is such a good fishery when it is a good fishery.
It's got one zone of the lake that's really fertile. I mean, one creek of the whole lake, but that one creek has cleaner water. It's got tons of vegetation. And that's just where they want to live. If you have a place that's void of any grass, and there's one section of the lake that has hydrilla or some other good submergent vegetation, that's where the majority population is going to congregate. And Conroe is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I've been out there one time because when I played baseball, there was a couple baseball camps I'd go to out there, and my uncle lived, I think it was like 40 minutes away from the boat ramp. One of the main boat ramps, so I'll just go stand off the dock and blast a drop shot around and catch a bunch of 12 inchers. But
yeah, there's a handful of those.
Oh yeah, but so going on stage 2, that was Harris Chain, right?
Yep, Harris Chain. Oh man, that one's one that for me, I finished 11th, had a solid tournament, just barely missed that top 10. But I'd give myself probably a B-, C+ on that one. It was a good tournament. Don't get me wrong. You can't ever be, too disappointed with 11th. It was a good event, but I had the makings of something really special if I had just played the cards right for the wind. And the wind switched a little bit every day and was blowing really hard. I mean, our most minimal day wind-wise in the tournament was the first day, and it blew gusts of 20. Every other day was gusts of 25, 30 plus. Culminating in the knockout round to gusts of almost 40 miles an hour. So, I had a good deal found offshore. But every day when the wind switched, the bite would kind of move. That population would shift and be kind of hard to find. In 2.5 hours, it was just, a lot of times it would take an hour, hour and a half to get back dialed in as to where they moved to. And then I'd get to cash in for maybe an hour or an hour and a half. And it just wasn't enough time to make it all work in my one scope period. And I had a good secondary deal. I was catching them pretty good up shallow, throwing a wacky worm, and sight fishing a little bit. And it was a very solid deal to go with my scope period. But the last day that I was there, the knockout round, the scope period just kind of it didn't culminate the way I thought it was going to. I caught more weight without scope that day than I caught with it by a pretty decent margin.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things, like I was leaning really heavy on my offshore deal. And it never materialized once that wind got up the way I needed it to. And I ended up finishing that one 11th. So after that one, I think I was in third in Angler of the Year going to the third event. So that one, definitely had me in a position that I wanted to be in after the first two events.
Yeah. Did you stay on Harris or were you locking?
I didn't do any locking, but I did fish elsewhere. So I got out of Harris and I went down to spend a little bit of time in Beauclair, a little bit of time in Dora. That's kind of my main deal. So I was going a good distance from takeoff, which definitely played a role in me picking when I wanted to use scope, because I didn't want to, lose 15 or 20 minutes of my period just trying to get where I'm trying to go.
Yeah.
So that played a role in terms of choosing when to use scope. And that one I caught my big fish of that tournament was like a 6-pounder. So it was a good start for heavy hitters as well after the first two events, having an 8 at Conroe and a 6 at Harris Chain.
Yeah. So did a lot of the field lock, or did a lot of the guys stay in that area?
Man, the majority of the top 10, once the field got whittled down, the majority of the top 10 ended up finding themselves, in a Popka. So they were making a long haul from takeoff. It wasn't a trailered event, so you had to make that move by boat. So you have to go across Big Harris, through the Dead River, across Eustis, through the Dora Canal, across Dora, across Beauclair, and then down the Apopka Canal to the Apopka Lock, which can hold 3 boats at a time. You're going to sit there, wait for your cycles to get through, get down, and then you got to go down the Apopka Canal the rest of the way and into Lake Apopka, which in and of itself is like 9 or 10 miles wide. So it's a big commitment.
Yeah.
But most of the top 10 ended up being down there. So that was there was definitely a huge player in that tournament was Apopka and the lock dilemma.
Yeah, and then going on stage 3, you had a pretty good event. Yeah.
Yep. So rolling into stage 3, I was in third in Angler of the Year. Had a good start in heavy hitters. So really at this point, you're 2 events in and you're kind of starting to hit the stride of like, okay, now we're seeing what's feasible for the year. Because after 2 tournaments, if you have 2 subpar events, you can count yourself out for AOI. If you don't catch 2 big ones at both Conroe and Harris, which were the 2 best opportunities all year to catch a giant. If you didn't catch a big one at one of those 2, you knew you were probably fighting an uphill battle with heavy hitters. Potentially, starting to think about making the red crest cut or if you had a good first 2 events, you could start kind of laying the tracks down to try and fish for AOI. And so at that point, that's kind of what was going through my mind. And so I showed up to Murray, focused on how do I try to win the event. I knew Murray on paper set up right for me to go out there and catch them. But I knew, in that one, you weren't going to be able to catch your scope fish without scope. And you weren't going to want to use scope to catch fish that you could catch otherwise. So I went in with a 2-pronged approach in that one. I wasn't fishing the same deal throughout, scope, no scope. So I went in and I caught them on a minnow in ditches on a bait deal in the morning. So in the morning on those lakes, in that South Carolina, North Carolina region, there's a lot of places, North Georgia as well, where the herring get up in the pockets and in the creeks in the mornings really early. And that played a big role for me. And so I would use scope right off the bat to catch those suspended fish first thing in the morning. And then as the sun would get up, they'd start relating to the docks really aggressively. They'd get really tight under these docks and they'd get really predictable based on where the shade lied. And so the rest of the day I would go skip docks. And I mean, it was just kind of clockwork. You'd go and fish 5 or 6 docks that set up right on a little round point with a little bit of gravel underneath it in that 5 to 8 foot zone. And if you could stay off them, keep from spooking them, and make a long cast with a worm, every 5 or 6 docks set up right, you'd catch scoreable. And so that was my no scope deal that I would catch, teens to 20 and change a day, just kind of plucking away dock fishing the rest of the day after shutting scope off. And the last day, we never got that sunshine that we had the rest of the event. So with that cloud cover, it made the dock deal a little bit inferior, but it made the morning bite and that herring deal better. So the last day, it was all about, I ran up a lot of weight right off the bat, and it was just kind of pace it out from there, make sure to go and capitalize on the opportunities that I was going to get, because I knew it was not going to be a bunch. But that's kind of the dynamic with our tournaments, man, is that a lot of times, when it comes to condition changes, the conditions will set up a certain way leading up to the championship round. And so because of the every fish counts format and how if you want to make it to that next round, you got to be doing the A1 best thing generally most of the time. So 9 out of 10 people that were in that championship round got there on the strength of probably some sort of either minnow dock combo or dock fishing alone. And then there was one, Jeff Sprague made it there without dock fishing, but the rest of us were there because of either minnow and docks or just docks. And so when that dock bite died the last day, it kind of died on all of us. And so the weights weren't super strong the last day compared to the rest of the week. When that cloud cover showed up, the sun went away, the fish got a little bit looser related to those docks, and it made it harder to pattern them and fish them quickly, which made you far more inefficient. So it kind of died on all of us. So I locked in. I knew it was just going to be about beating, the rest of the guys, being more proficient at dock fishing the rest of the day, not necessarily going out there and just lighting the world on fire, but making sure that what opportunities I got, I capitalized on, could put them in the boat to help sustain that lead, and ended up going out with the win on that one.
Yeah,
it was a pretty fantastic event, and any opportunity you get to win in a Bass Pro Tour event, elite event, heck, I mean, you talk, Toyota Series, BFL, doesn't matter, man. Anytime you have the opportunity to win, it's something that's special. Winning is its own thing. There's nothing else that's like it. I love getting top tens, but winning is its own experience. So Murray's one that'll always be a special memory for me.
Yeah.
It was a good event for the third event of the season. Moved me up second in AOY, going into the fourth.
Yeah, it was awesome to watch you hoist that thing. And you're catching most of your fish on a Nico rig, right?
Yep. So minnow in the morning and Nico in the afternoon. Nico was my dock deal. Every single dock fish I weighed all week long was on the Nico rig.
Awesome. Then going on, was Red Crest after that?
Yeah. So Red Crest chronologically was our next event.
Yeah.
And for me, man, it was an event where, there's no points involved, being that overall the payout's not super dense other than the win. I mean, $300,000 for the win is something that's undeniable. So I went into it going, I've got to take a strategy in this one that it allows me to fish in a manner that could potentially give me an advantage if I found something special. Meaning with my fishing style, I'm going to go probably try to chase something offshore or chase a population that other people aren't targeting. That's just maybe a little bit off the bank, but I knew this one was going to take a lot of weight. So I was going to try and lean into that offshore strength, lean into that that main river deal. And so I committed most of my practice to fishing the main river, fishing offshore, because I knew if I found something special, I could potentially turn it into a win. And so I went into that one, probably on a place, normally that I wouldn't be mentally, because mentally I'm normally like layup. Every opportunity you get, you just all day long, just make the most bet you can in terms of odds all day, and eventually it'll pan out. But that's a really good approach for making top tens. But if you're trying to just pointedly chase winning an event, one specific event, it's not a great strategy. So I went in a little bit different, and it kind of led to me making some risky decisions based on the weather. So, the first half of our season, wind was a really big factor in every single event. Guntersville was no different for Red Crest. The wind bucked the current. I was catching some main river current fish, and whenever that happened, they just kind of break up. They disperse. They don't get balled up as tight on some of those current places on the heads of certain pieces of cover and things like that. So it was one of those situations where I should have planned it better, strategized it better based on the weather, and I just kind of went in bullheaded and was like, I'm just going to fight through it and it'll work out. And just missed the cut for the knockout round in that one. It was definitely one I wasn't proud of. That's one I'd give myself a really subpar grade on that tournament. Like that was an F. That was a fail. That was a bad tournament.
Yeah.
It was just some poor decision making, based on the conditions that we were coming into. If I was fishing for points or I was fishing to try and make a top 10, I would have made a much wiser decision in terms of dealing with those conditions and picking a better strategy. But because all I was focused on was just laser focus on trying to win the tournament, despite the fact that the conditions were different in the back half of the tournament. Like with ours, because our weight's 0 after the qualifying round, you can't win the tournament in the qualifying round. So I should have been planning for the conditions late in the tournament and having a secondary strategy to help get me there. And I really didn't. I just had one strategy. And despite, I thought I was just going to fight my way through it, and it didn't work out. And so in that one, it was a really poor event for me. But it was one that was good to see. I employed the let's go for it high risk strategy, and it did not work. Blew up in my face, and it's a strategy I will not be employing at next year's Red Crest.
That's smart. Did you guys get the next year's schedule yet?
So we've got our next year's schedule, but Red Crest is the only event that's not been announced yet.
Yeah. What do you think of next year's schedule?
I'm really excited about it, man. It's got a lot of promise. So we go, just a quick rundown: January Guntersville, February Hartwell, March we fish both at Whitney and Waco in Texas, and then OHIV in Brownwood.
Yeah.
And then we have a Red Crest after that. Then we have our 5th event of the regular season at Beaver Lake the last weekend in April. Then we have a decent little gap. Well, we go to Heavy Hitters in Orange Lake, Gainesville, Florida. And then after that, we go to Grand Lake for stage 6 and Lake Erie for stage 7. So the one thing that stands out to me a lot about that schedule, it's void of grass compared to this year's schedule. This year we had Conroe, the Harris Chain, we had Chickamauga, we had Guntersville, we had the Potomac and Saginaw Bay. We had a lot of grass on this year's schedule. Next year, we've got far less grass because January Guntersville the grass does not play like it does in April. It plays a role, but not as big of a role. Hartwell does not have blade of grass. Whitney and Waco grass might play a small role, but it's not going to play a huge role from what I can tell. OHIV and Brownwood's going to be the same situation. And then Beaver Lake, no grass. Grand Lake, no grass. In Erie, the grass will play a role for sure. But Erie, the largemouth population, is not nearly as dominant as it is at Saginaw Bay. So, that's going to be a similar, not same tournament to Saginaw Bay this year. But it's a little bit – the smallmouth are going to play a little bit more of a role at Erie than they did at Sag.
Yeah. Here on the schedule, I feel bad for the guys going to Lake Hartwell. I hate Lake Hartwell. It's not my jam. That place is so hard to catch fish.
Dude, they are some of the most intelligent fish in the country. Hartwell is one where, man, if you're not doing everything right, you might not catch hardly any of them.
Yeah.
It's got so many fish in it. It doesn't matter how many are in it if you can't convince them to bite. So I am glad we're going in February and not in like May or June, because once that water gets warm and they've been fished for months on end, those fish start getting really intelligent really fast. And so to make those fish bite, Hartwell, Lanier's kind of in that same box. To make those fish bite, you need the water cold. You need it before everyone gets out and pressures them for months on end, and before the water gets warm enough that they get smart on you. So that one's going to be a good event, but it's a place that can be pretty rough if the water's warm.
Oh, I know. I got dealt a bad hand. I got sent there in August.
Yeah. August on Hartwell is not I wouldn't say it's a fishing vacation by any means.
But OHIV should be good to go catch you like a 13-pounder or something, make heavy hitters that way.
Yeah, dude. It's that between Whitney and Waco, Ivy and Brownwood, Guntersville, those are going to take a considerable size bass to kind of solidify your spot in heavy hitters. Hartwell, Beaver, Grand, really Hartwell, Beaver, and Erie. Those are going to be ones where the biggest bass caught in the tournament won't be all that much bigger than the smallest bass caught in the tournament, or the smallest heavy hitters fish in the tournament. Grand will have a little bit of disparity. It's got some big fish in it, but
yeah,
the ones to gain on next year will be the Texas events, in Guntersville for sure.
Yeah, and there hasn't been a big tournament on Beaver in a long time.
There hasn't. That's one thing that's really exciting. You know, I like when we go to somewhere that's got a little bit less tournament history, because it definitely gives an advantage to guys that have not done it for 20 years. And
Yeah.
I say an advantage. It technically doesn't give an advantage, but it somewhat strips that advantage that people have of going somewhere they've been a million times. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of guys in our field that are very familiar with Guntersville. Maybe not in January, but they're very familiar with Guntersville. A lot of guys that are very familiar with Hartwell. And, you know, that's one thing that really excites me about Beaver is that it's a style of fishery that I really like, but it's not one that a ton of people have very recent knowledge on. So it's one of those, it's going to be anybody's game.
Yeah, the guys that's been to Beaver, though, is going to be like Ott and Andy Montgomery. Those guys probably been there because they've been in the sport for so long.
Yeah, I mean, and really with Beaver, a lot of the guys that are going to have some familiarity with it are going to be guys with an FLW background. You know, back in the day, FLW definitely frequented Beaver Lake. So, you know, you talk about a David Dudley and Andy Morgan, Brian Thrift, guys that have that FLW background are going to have a little bit of a base of knowledge to work on Beaver, whereas most of the rest of us have never even been there.
Yeah. Well, looking at your year this year, you had a great year this year. You have had a lot of highs more than lows. Came out with a win. That's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty legit, man. Like I mean, to back up finishing second in AOY last year with third this year, like obviously you want to win Angler of the Year. That's the goal. That's what we're all shooting for. But consistency says a lot, and keeping yourself in that conversation matters. So we've got some work to do because although I finished third this year, the schism between me and Wheeler in terms of points accrued was pretty substantial. I mean, if he had, let's say he finishes in the top 20 at the Potomac River, essentially he could have not showed up to the last event of the year and still won Angler of the Year if he finished in the top 20 of the Potomac, which still would have been his worst tournament by a large margin from his second worst. And he would have made it where nobody could catch him even if he didn't show up to the last event. So there's some work to be done, significant work to be done, because he is, I mean, right now he is that much better than everybody. You know, it doesn't even make sense to be that much better. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And it helps him that he gets AOY and wins the last event of the year. So
yeah, dude. I mean, that's incredibly impressive. You know, that's what you call an exclamation point.
Yeah, great angler. And then DC blew Red Crest pretty out of the water, pretty good, and did real good on that. And then he was running 70 miles up the lake, and he was all by himself up there. So
yep. Connell winning 3 of the 6 Red Crests is a pretty impressive stat.
Yeah. It was great watching those guys. But so going on stage 4, how do you think you did on 4?
So that was Chickamauga Nickajack. With the hand I was dealt in that one, not having spent any time on Nickajack, hardly, you know, I'd spent like 2 hours running around in practice. Not having spent any time on the lake at all fishing prior to the start of the knockout round. I mean, given the hand I was dealt, that's honestly probably the tournament I was proudest of on the schedule. I didn't have anything going for me going into that knockout round, and I went out, employed a pretty aggressive strategy. I got through Chickamauga pretty easily. I ended up finishing that round in the top 10, catching bedfish and fry garters, you know, off the bank like I like to. And then I had a mix of some shallow stuff that I ran when I didn't have scopes, some docks, some duck blinds, things like that, just to kind of, you know, nickel and dime them. But that was one where, you know, getting through Chickamauga wasn't too hard. But once I got to Nickajack, I didn't really have any time on the water on Nickajack to find them. So I employed an aggressive strategy to idle the first half of the day at Nickajack and just side scan, looking for an area that might be productive to go find spawning fish. And I found 2 or 3 areas that I thought were really promising from what I'd seen on side scan, but one of them was like that and then some. You know, it actually had some clean bottom. It looked really productive. And so I started out my final period there. I caught a couple scorables right at the end of the second period, just fishing around in that area. And I turned scope on the last period and jumped up from, I think I was in like 16th or 17th and flew all the way up into 4th place to finish the knockout round on the strength of that scope period, because I went out committed to trying to find an area that was productive, and I didn't care that it's, half of the day I wasn't even fishing. I knew that was the strategy that was going to give me the best odds to make the championship round. Put all my eggs in one basket of trying to find somewhere really special, and I did. And I went out there, obliterated, and made that championship round. And unfortunately for me, that was about the only place in Nickajack that set up that way, in that positive of a manner. I caught a handful of scorables that way the next day, but championship round, went out, fished around, wasted the entire first period trying to look for something magical again. Just didn't work out. Then I nickel and dimed in the second, third period, finished, I want to say 8th in that one. So wasn't a great championship round in terms of what I wanted, but for the hand I was dealt, not being prepared for Nickajack, I was really happy with my performance in that tournament. So that was a good one. And I mean, it had me set up in second in AOY still. And at that point, we were past the halfway point of the season. So, coming down the home stretch, I felt like I had a chance. That's really all I could ask for after that one.
Yeah. I had an event like that this year up on Clear Lake. On my last day of practice, where I had to pull off the water, I found one area that the water was just slightly cleaner than the rest of the lake, and there was a little less grass. And I pulled up there in the first day of the tournament. I had 19 pounds by 8 o'clock in the morning. So
that's awesome, dude.
And then the second day, the water cleared up everywhere. I was able to sight fish, and that day I had 27. And then the last day, I kind of dropped the ball. The last day, I had 12 and a quarter for 2, but 2 nice ones at least.
Yeah. Clear Lake has been putting it out this year.
Oh yeah. Earlier this year, someone caught an almost 16. Big fish of the event I was at was almost 13. Just giants, just giants being
insane.
Yeah. But they used to put Elite Series events on there, like the one Steve Kennedy won in 07, which blew that out of the water. That was crazy. 34 pounds on the last day or something like that.
Yeah.
Mega bag.
Yeah, awesome. That's an all-time cool tournament to go back and watch. I watched that one a couple times.
Oh, that one's like frequently on my TV all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's just about every day because I love swim baiting. I like throwing the big little stins and stuff, and that tournament is just people throwing the swim bait.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you weren't throwing a big bait in that one, you weren't going to win.
Yeah. Cool thing is that tree Steve Kennedy was fishing on Shag Rock. The tree's still there on Shag Rock, so
that's cool.
Go back and see that tree. Well, I didn't catch anything on Shag Rock, but that thing's probably hammered all the time. But
yeah, that's generally what happens after a place gets a tournament won on it, man. As soon as that happens, whatever place it gets won on is exposed forever.
Yeah. John Pearl, Nathan Phillips just blew it out of the water, 100 pounds, 3 days. Absolutely great. Yeah. Because we don't have any cuts or anything. We just fish 3 days straight, and that's it. To have 100 pounds in those 3 days, that's what a lot of guys are doing on like 4 and stuff. This giant bass. Then I think Steve Kennedy, John Pearl on his first day, I think he had like 30 something. Just huge bags, and they're catching them on minnows and glide baits and.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. I mean, to catch 100 pounds in 3 days is unbelievable. Like to do it in 5 days would be. I mean, that's 20 pounds a day for 5 days straight. Like very few people have ever caught 20 pounds a day for 5 days straight in their life. So like to do that in 5 days, much less 4, much less 3, would be pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's the guys that some of those West guys. I can see a lot of these guys like Nathan Phillips. He's one of the guys that fish out in Clear Lake and does like all the California stuff. I think he could do pretty okay on the Elite Series or something like that. Because a lot of these guys out here, we have like the BAM Tour and One Bass. Yeah. We used to have like Major League Fishing out here, but they don't come out to the West that much anymore because they weren't getting enough guys out here doing them.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate, man, because like there's some incredible talent out West, and you guys have some absolutely unbelievable fisheries. I'd love to see the mainstream interest come back for that because I would love to get to partake in fishing some events out there.
Yeah, you'd love Clear Lake.
The place looks incredible.
Clear Lake is such an because you can do everything on Clear Lake. You can flip docks, you can flip mats, you can really you don't really fish offshore there. It's like the deepest part of the lake's like 25 feet of water, and nothing lives out there. I've checked every time I've gone out there. But that lake is just so diverse, and it's not like anything else in the country. The fishing there is there's no such thing as stunted bass there. Everything's just big.
Yeah.
Your average during the week's like a 3-pounder. And that's something like it's just an unbelievable fishery. And then our next one we go to is Lake Mead. And that's like a big weight there is like 20 pounds. That's huge there. But
yeah,
like to get a check at Lake Mead in September is going to probably be 15 gotcha. Pounds a day will get you a check. And maybe you might with it just depending how the lake's fishing. But last year, Julius Maisie won it. And I think he had 20 pounds a day, just about 20 pounds a day. But
that's pretty impressive.
And then the last one of the year is like our Bassmaster Classic is the U.S. Open, and then so I'm gonna start pre-practice for that because Mojave's it's not the biggest lake, but it's deep, and then up the lake it has current and it's kind of shallow up there.
Gotcha.
And you can catch a fish looking at it in like 45 feet of water. It's super clear, and
that's unbelievable.
It's probably the hardest event we'll go to this year because it's beat on. It's in October. It's going to be hot. And then I can't even remember who won it last year. I think it was Bryant Smith.
Yep. You're right.
And then Kyle Grover won the year before, and then Josh Bertrand won 3 years ago. So, and that was incredible to watch because that was when I was a co-angler.
Yeah.
One of my buddies fished with Josh and said he was the most unbelievable live scoper he's ever seen.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I've got a buddy of mine gone out to fish it a couple times. Spencer Shuffield's gone out there, and Spencer loves fishing that event. And he said a lot of good things about it.
Second place.
Do what?
He always gets second.
Yeah, he really wants to win that tournament. He said he wants to win that tournament just about as bad as any.
Yeah, you need to come out with him this year.
Oh, dude, that'd be a ball. I'd really enjoy that.
It's pretty fun, but it's just hard. It's a hard event because it's not the biggest lake, and everywhere you go, there's 4 or 5 guys on an area.
Yeah, those events are hard to win because it takes really a lot of good timing in terms of showing up places when other people aren't there, and that's kind of hard you can't really manufacture that. It just kind of happens.
Yeah. The biggest lake we'll fish this year, other than like Lake Shasta, where we went to in February, is Lake Mead. Lake Mead's huge.
Yeah.
There's 3 giant arms. So we're launching like right before the Narrows, and you can go up into the Las Vegas Wash where a lot of guys go because the predominantly bigger largemouth live up in the Wash. But you can go down the lake to Government, and you can go flip in Government, and there's just so much to do on Lake Mead. But you can burn yourself really bad if you pull into the wrong arm.
Yeah.
And if it gets if you're an arm and it like forecasts wind, it won't be windy in your arm. You go in the main lake and you're done for.
Yeah.
You're going to be late for sure. And I've had one of those events where me and my buddy, we came back like 15 minutes late because it was slick calm in our area, and we come out and there's like 6-footers.
Yeah, dude, that's a sketchy thing about places that get really big is it's really hard to plan anything because if it gets windy and it gets rough, you're out of luck. And some of those places, it's not worth fishing wherever the launch is. And so you want to push it as long as you can. Sometimes you just get burnt.
Yeah, and that and it happens, and then you try to learn, but then it happens again sometimes.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, but I'm just glad we don't fish tidal fisheries because I definitely not I'd lose time and I'd be stuck for sure. I'd be done for.
Their tidal fisheries are really interesting, man. They're their own thing for sure because it's on every single tidal fishery that I've been to at least. Every single inch of that fishery at some point in the day is bad.
Yeah.
Not every inch of it is good at some point, but every single inch of that river, that bay, whatever it is, at some point in the day is bad because it's either good at a high tide, good at low tide, good at incoming, good at falling. It's good at a specific tide, but most of the rest of the day it's the Dead Sea. And so that's the thing about tidal fishing that's so frustrating is you got to constantly be moving, because if you're not moving, they're leaving you. And so that's tidal fishing is just it's its own thing for sure. And if you don't time it right, it's really questionable, especially in the getting stuck category too.
Yeah. Like, so the MLF used to take a lot of guys to the Delta, and Ish Monroe, he would win a lot of those events. Ish is an awesome angler, but Aaron Martins was around. Aaron was awesome on the Delta.
Yep, Aaron was pretty incredible there. I remember watching one. I can't remember who won it. It may have been John Cruz. It was in the 2000s that I think him and Aaron and Ish were all catching them up shallow. I think there was some sight fishing going on. It was a really cool event.
And then Aaron was such a different fisherman. He won an Elite Series at Havasu, and he was flipping masks that had blackbirds on them. Like, that's like, how do you just, like, that's crazy.
That was such a cool event. And if I remember correctly, I think he won 2 that year, because I think he went and won the Chesapeake Bay event. That was may have been their next event. But that was a cool one to watch, is him flipping over all those reeds, flipping on for those bird eaters. It was such a crazy event. And that was a cool one for sure.
Yeah, I've seen fish eat baby ducks at Havasu.
Yeah,
like, it's such a fun lake.
We've got a lake over here where I've caught fish and had feathers spit up in my live well. Yeah. I think when you got a place that has a big, rich population of, or I guess I say population, environment of reeds or buggy whips, and you get birds that nest back in the grass, I think there's definitely a large percentage of those birds that, naturally, if they were nesting on land, would fall out of the nest, and you'd see them on the ground beneath the nest. Well, if they make that nest over the water, there's not a ground to fall onto. They're falling in that water. And bass aren't unintelligent enough not to notice that and notice that opportunity. And bass don't need to feed so often that wouldn't be a good situation for them. So, they're super opportunistic, and I'm sure it only takes about one population of bass figuring that out for that to become a trend for generations.
Yeah. Bass are people don't think bass are that smart. A lot of people that think that are the guys that are fishing ponds, pond bass, farm pond bass. And
bass are incredibly educatable, man. Like, obviously, any of us that have fished for pond fish or fish that are unpressured know that, like, bass can be extraordinarily dumb. They can be in their most base sense. If they are not messed with, if they're in a fishery with low visibility, they are incredibly susceptible to getting caught. But they don't let you do it for very long.
Yeah.
Like, anybody that's pond fished, it doesn't matter how dumb they start out. You make one pass around that pond and you fish it super meticulously, that second pass around the pond, you're not going to get very many bites if you're doing the same thing you did the first time around.
Yeah.
You will get very minimal. You're going to have to make an adjustment. And if they're real dumb, you can make an adjustment and torch them again.
Yeah.
But if they're any kind of pressured, even if you make an adjustment, it might be a little better, but it's still going to be far less productive than your first time around that body of water.
Yeah.
So bass, they're quick learners for sure. They don't let you fool around with them too long before they make an adjustment.
Unless they're on a bed or something, then they're just
especially a smallmouth.
Yeah.
There's a smallmouth on a bed. That sucker's going to defend that bed no matter what.
Yeah, you can catch that thing like 30 times in a row.
Pretty much.
Before it's done. But smallmouth are probably other than spots in some cases, are probably the hardest ones to catch, in my opinion. It depends on the fishery.
If you give them warm water and clean water,
yeah,
they become extraordinarily hard to catch. And the problem with smallmouth is because of the way they live their lives and just because of their preferred forage, you don't have as many options in terms of bait selection as you do with largemouth, because smallmouth are going to live in a fishery, in a single fishery. They're going to live one way. They're not going to live 4, 5, 7, 12 different ways. You know, you go to a largemouth lake and you could catch largemouth out of a brush pile. You can go catch a largemouth suspended. You can go catch a largemouth out of submergent grass. You can go catch a largemouth under a dock. And so if you got a lake that's abundant with largemouth, there's probably a population doing a lot of different things. Don't get me wrong. The majority of the population is going to do one thing. But, you know, the rest of the population will scatter amongst a lot of options. Smallmouth, man, best case scenario, if you're on a really, really good smallmouth fishery, they might do 3 different things, but chances are there's going to be one really main thing. that they're all living surrounded by. And so it just shrinks your bait selection so much. You're only going to have a handful of things that you can approach them with. So you can't keep them as fresh as you can keep largemouth. And smallmouth, when you give them visibility, they just are so curious that you oftentimes can't get your presentation to them before they come up to try and meet it. And it just makes it really hard to sneak up on them because smallmouth are so aware of everything that's going on around them, and they're so willing to go investigate.
Yeah, that's how Lake Mojave is because when we go, the water's 80 degrees.
Yeah,
water's hot. There's people ripping around in jet boats, and there's about 5 bass boats every 20 feet.
Yeah,
but the most areas that you're catching them, you pull up, and then there's a guy already calling. And that's because there's few rocks out deep, and those are all everybody knows about those rocks.
Yeah.
But those fish, they stack up on those rocks super good. But I spend a lot of my time at Mojave as far away as I can from everybody else. So we launched from a place called Catherine's Landing, and I'll drive my boat all the way up to a place called Willow Beach, and that's probably an hour and a quarter run from everybody else. So I'll fish up there, and then I won't see a boat all day.
Yeah, that's always a good solution if you're on a place where they get pressured and they're pretty smart, is trying to go fish for something that don't get fished for. Because oftentimes that's the way to beat it.
Yeah, the best part about being up in Willow Beach, though, it's heavy current up there. And there's smallmouth up there. They're eating more shad. They're eating small trout because that's where they stock the trout in the lake.
Yeah.
But you'll be fishing and you'll be going by a bank. And you'll see a smallmouth get absolutely crushed by a giant striper or something.
Yeah.
There's giant stripers up in Mojave, but
that's crazy.
But Mojave, I'm excited, but I'm not going in with super high hopes of catching them really good. I'm shooting for probably 20-ish pounds a day.
Yeah.
I think I can maybe win with 20 a day, but I think I can have I'll probably have a top 10 finish with 20 a day.
Yeah. I just try to shoot for what do I think is going to make the top 10, and that's kind of my bar. Because if you keep yourself around that number, it only takes a bite or two to skew it where you're talking, potentially threatening winning.
Yeah. Just got to put yourself in those good positions and make the right rotations, especially on lakes we have out here. If you're making the wrong rotations at the wrong time, especially at Lake Shasta in February. So I had this one area in practice. I was catching big spots for there. Well, not like the big spot of the tournament was like a 9-pounder, but absolutely mega spot. But it's probably like co-angler caught it off the back of the dude's boat.
That's unbelievable.
But so I was fishing. I was catching 3.5, 4-pound spots out of this area, and I made I started there, and I just made the bad rotation because when I pulled in, it was first cast. I caught like a keeper, a little 12-inch. Now the biggest fish I caught there was like a 2.5-pound spot. So I ran out of there, and then I made a semi-good rotation. My first cast in my next area, I caught a 4.25-pound spot.
That's legit.
Yeah, just live scoping, but you're fishing for spots over like 115 feet of water there.
Yeah,
and
there's out there suspended and roaming around.
So there's a place called the Pit Arm, and it's just giant redwood trees in the water. So you'll put your trolling motor out, and you're fishing these trees, and there's giants on them, but they're so smart because they see so many baits.
Yeah,
throughout the day on those trees, they'll chase your bait to the boat, and then they'll just die off, and they'll go.
Yeah.
But they're smart there.
They're strong about for sure.
Joe Uribe, one of the guys out here that dominates, he won that event, and he had I think he had just about 20 pounds a day. For that was my first time there, and I finished in I think 35th or something out of 100-something boaters. So
nice.
I wasn't too mad.
Solid.
But it was fun. I was sitting in 5th for a really long time. I think I was sitting in 5th till the last flight. So then I got bumped down. I was like, dang it. So it was a fun tournament.
Yeah, dude. I mean, as long as you can garner some sort of learning experience, that's really kind of the value early on for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so going on the last event of the year, Saginaw Bay. How do you think you did on the SAG?
Man, I went out and had a game plan. I knew to win it, have any chance to win AOY, I was going to have to take a pretty aggressive approach. I mean, I was 20-something points behind, so I knew I was going to have to do something drastic to have any shot. So I went out knowing I was going to have to fish different. So I went in full-on commitment to smallmouth. And, man, I went out and caught them pretty good. I mean, had 115 pounds over 2 days. And I was 5 ounces out of making that knockout round cut. But, I mean, overall, looking back on it, like, I wish I'd made a different decision, obviously, because the goal is not to finish 21st. But made a solid check and caught him about as good as I could catch him. And it was just one of those situations where it just didn't work out for me. I was counting on it taking about 90, 100 pounds to make the knockout round. And it took more than that. And I came up just a little bit shy. And even if I had made the knockout round, in that one, you weren't going to catch enough smallmouth in one day to make the championship round. You just couldn't. You could not go out and catch 70-something, 80 pounds of smallmouth after they'd been beat on for 2 days. There were a handful of guys, Connell and Mark Daniels and Bobby Lane that made it into that knockout round on the strength of at least primarily smallmouth. And it just didn't work out past that because of how high the weights were in one day for you to carry that into the championship round. So it just wasn't the right play in that one for trying to make the championship round. But, it was a solid event, and I had a good time. And, Wheeler won the event, so there was nothing to be gained in terms of AOY.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things that, like, if I could go back and do it different, obviously I would have made an adjustment. But at the end of the day, winning the event would have been hard. And AOY was it was impossible to attain. So it was one of those things that, I enjoyed it. I made a check, had a good time. Nothing more I could have done about it, really.
Yeah. So overall, you had a pretty fun year this year on the BT.
Absolutely. It was a good time. I really enjoyed it. Made 4 top 10s and then, made a check in every event I fished. So it was one of those situations where you can't really complain.
Yeah. So you just capitalized on the year, and then so you're having 2 good years in a row so far. Just carry the momentum into next season.
I hope so, man. I hope so. I'm really looking forward to it.
You gonna go shoot some deer? You gonna go?
I'm not. I'm gonna go catch some more bass. We got a handful of tournaments coming up in the fall, so still got some more work to do. But none of that's BPT. We got 2 team series, Toyota series event, Toyota championship, and I'm going to fish the Black Bass Championship in Africa here in a couple weeks. So that's what I got coming up.
Who are you fishing that Black Bass Championship with?
My partner is Ott Defoe, so I'm really excited about that. Ott's a legend, somebody that I've looked up to for a long time. So to get to share the boat with him and fish in a team tournament with him is going to be really fun.
That'll be fun for you.
For sure.
We'll be watching out here.
I appreciate it, Jordan.
Yeah, the weather's nice, so I'm thinking I might go do a little night fishing.
I'd get after it, dude. They're going to catch themselves.
Yeah, I didn't go this morning, so I have to go tonight, so I don't break my streak.
No doubt.
But, yeah, so thanks for filming another one with me, Drew.
Appreciate it, dude.
Great talking to you, man. So we'll end it here. Thank you.
Thank you, dude. I really appreciate the time. It was a blast as always.
Yeah.